We're here, thrust into existence, apparently alive. But as consciousness is, as of yet, still a mystery, where here actually is likewise remains enigmatic. Nonetheless, our consciousness is experiencing something here. But what exactly? Step now thus into the DiMENSiONSCAPE, MG.
Certainly, I welcome your thoughts on any story I share. Now, a very special and personal one. But first, a few words. I decided if I'm going to tell you events from my life, I might as well tell the first one first. It was this one that indicated to me as a young man that unexplainable things would be following me just as they followed my family. I have quite a few stories to tell. Now, Jesus isn't a part of all of them, but he certainly was behind a lot of them. Like in this one, I'll call DREAMGiRL Alone. When I was about 19 or 20 in the summer between my second and third years of college, I transferred to a superior institution for my undergrad degree, film, television, and media. This saved money, although out of state, it was still close enough to my home for daily commuting on public transportation, which in itself ended up leading to another experience I had on a commuter train in a blizzard, but another day, another say. I digress. Now, a night person since a child, I was still asleep early in the afternoon when I experienced what I then supposed was a dream. Now, of course, I know it was not simply a dream, if that's what it was at all. If it was a dream unlike any I've had before or since. So, was it a glitch in the Matrix? I don't think the term glitch really applies to what I'm about to confess, but it might. Although this vision, which is what the dream actually turned out to be, certainly was supernatural. Moreover, it was a miraculous experience which places Jesus again squarely in the mix. The dream was about my ex-girlfriend. Let's call her Tina. Now, when I say I dreamed about her, don't think you know what I mean by that. You don't. You can't. You see, I didn't see her in the dream. I was her in the dream. Now, let me say here, I have never had any interest in being a woman. This was not my subconscious acting out some fantasy. Nonetheless, for no understandable reason, there I was, in her body, instantly knowing who I was, Tina, without aid of reflective surfaces, while also knowing I was me all the while looking out through her eyes. I had no idea of her thoughts during this vision, neither could I control her body. I was just inexplicably trapped inside her body, watching a seemingly random moment from her life unfold, like some third-eye spy. Only as I was about to learn, to my horror, this was not a random moment from her life. At this juncture, I feel it necessary to give just a splash of Tina and I's backstory. She looked like a good blend of Halle Berry and Janet Jackson. She was my first love. We had a long, serious relationship as high school ended, and we ended up at the same university where we continued our relationship until, for whatever reason, she had had enough of my kind of fun and ended our affair, breaking my heart. The semester she left me was my last at that institution, not because our relationship ended, but, as I said, I had found a far superior university for television and film. Not for nothing, the thought of running into her accidentally on campus wasn't exactly appealing either, and frankly did make leaving that much easier. I hadn't talked or corresponded at all with her in about a year in any form whatsoever. In every sense of the word, I had moved on. While true, I had no lady in my life, I saw the Tina relationship as dead. A pleasant but ultimately meaningless period of my life from a long time ago. In short, someone I used to know. And honestly, hadn't entered my thoughts in about a year. which made the dream all the more baffling. I knew Tina was being driven in some man's car, although she never looked at him during the vision. I could see she was in the passenger seat of a two-seat sporty car. The next thing I know, I'm watching helplessly as the car hurtled closer and closer to its final destination. I heard no screech of sliding tires. I felt no catch of locking brakes, as sight was my only sense. Until impact. I helplessly watched the car ram the rear end of an 18-wheeler truck. What I felt next, instead of crashing into that truck, was not pain, but terror ripping me from Morpheus's arms. I, that moment, felt myself crash back into my body. Next, I was upright in my bed in what I would later learn was a full-blown panic attack. The beating sweat, heavy breathing, and thudding heart let me know we had separated and I was out of her body and alive. Instantly, I wondered her fate, and a cold darkness draped around me like a blanket of snow. With the feel of cold death, I knew what I must do. There was no mistaking it. Call her immediately and warn her. It was demanding. It was imperative. It had to be done as soon as possible. Get out of this bed and do it now. Something screamed in my mind. I now know that voice well. Unfortunately, however, I didn't at the time. Thus, as a result of doubting what every fiber of my being was shouting at me in that terrifying moment, and honestly, I must shamefully admit, the spite of being scorned, I hesitated. I sat there trying to get myself under control, trying to be rational. This was crazy, made no sense, and I knew it would make none to her, other than cementing in her mind that her leaving had finally driven me mad. Well, I thought, I'm not giving her the satisfaction of thinking I still held a torch for her. No way. What was I supposed to do anyway? I knew her. I imagined the ridiculous light a raving phone call would put me in. That was not happening. Then, I'm ashamed to admit, darkness surfaced clearly in my soul, and I huffed away the last breaths of my attack and thought, besides, who cares what happens to her? She left me. I forced this to be my last thought on the subject and left my bed on wobbly legs. I still felt the burn of urgently warning her, just as my spirit within me screamed to, but my mind was made up. Pride this day would win. So I proceeded, knowing what I should do, to try to get on with my day. But that cold stayed with me. That first day came and went, pretty normal as I recall. The next day dawned, and again I trudged through my duties with the sense of dread lessened but still watching me. On the third day it was less still, yet palatable. During about the same time of day I awakened from the nightmarish vision. For whatever reason, I found myself wandering into the kitchen and just sitting at the table. This was rare for me because I was just sitting there doing nothing. And anyone who knows me knows I am never doing nothing unless I'm asleep or sick. But there I was, doing nothing, sitting as if waiting for something I didn't know to expect, arm's length from the house phone. It rang. I answered on the first ring and immediately recognized the strong, feminine voice saying my name. To my absolute shock, confusion, relief, and a twinge of yearning, it was her, Tina. My mind raced back immediately to the vision, but I again pushed it from my mind. But wow, I had to admit, what a coincidence. What were the odds of me having some bizarre dream of her only to get a call from her just days later, especially since she'd ended the relationship and we hadn't talked in so long. But my warm feeling soon ran cold. The call was strange. She was weird. She'd heard me speak, but wouldn't reply, but in monosyllabic grunts. I didn't understand. It was beyond awkward. She seemed dark somehow. Not appreciating the heavy vibe, I figured to lighten it by doing what you do in these phone-bound situations. Talk. I remember trying to manufacture something resembling a jovial tone and try to act natural. I couldn't help wondering, though, what she could possibly want. Could it be that she was interested in getting back together? I hoped so. Soon, though, I found her call was far from about our ill-fated romance and was going to forever twist my notion of reality, time, and space. Searching for conversation fodder, I shoot. So, how have things been going? Okay, she mumbles. Okay, I think. Not great, I guess. What have you been doing then? I tried. Nothing. And goes silent again. By this time, I'm getting antsy, and hope for reconciliation in this conversation was quickly going down in flames. There was no passion at all in her tone. Why call me if she has nothing to say, I wondered. Leave me alone, Tina. I remember having the strange but strong sensation she herself didn't know why she was calling. Wearying of this drab but heartbreaking non-talk we were having, I decided to try one last friendly prompt before I was going to politely excuse myself from the call and from the torture. Well, I asked, what's new? She started then, as if suddenly remembering something important, blurted out in a passion missing before, oh, I was in a car accident the other day. My blood ran cold. I felt dizzy. I was afraid. When clairvoyance is depicted in movies, even when clearly traumatic to the characters, people still think it's cool. I guess if you have a vision of something like winning lottery numbers, it could be, but mine so far have been 99% traumatic. Stop talking. I almost shouted and proceeded to blurt out every detail of the vision. She was in a red Pontiac. It was early afternoon when it happened. The interior of the car was gray leather. She had on gray jeans. It was a clear day. The truck had no trailer. On and on I went, conveying even the smallest of details. Finally, she's had enough and interrupts. Yes, you talked to my mother? No, I said, trying to keep my voice sounding calm in spite of a new panic attack starting in my chest. It happened 2 days ago, didn't it? I said. Yes. How did you know? She was genuinely puzzled. So was I. I saw it in a dream, I confessed. You what? She exclaimed. Well, why didn't you call me and warn me? She emotionally added. There I was, exposed. I was ashamed. I was wrong. For the first time, I had to face the man in the mirror. I had to face that what I had done, or hadn't done, rather, was wrong, maybe evil. I felt an inch tall. The only thing I could do at that point, so long after the fact, was to ask if she was all right. Yeah, more or less, she told me. I did get whiplash, though, and will have to wear a neck brace for a while, but the doctor's prognosis is for a full recovery. I managed to keep my full-on panic attack out of my mouth to gurgle up a single good, but then took the deepest sigh of relief of my life up to that point. Then, almost as suddenly as it started, the call ended. No explanation, no reason, just goodbye. So this is the Twilight Zone, I darkly thought. I was left spinning. Is everything I dream now going to happen, I wondered? I'm glad to report it didn't. That is, now my visions happen while I'm awake. But regardless, be they gifts or curses, no visions can be credited to me. They flow from God. I told this story first because it awakened me to a new phase of life and really prepared me for what was coming. All my own stories are possible because of this one. While I'm still ashamed, it taught me a lesson, and I never failed to act on any visions, revelations of the future, or supernatural knowledge ever again. I now understand this was Jesus' alarm clock. mentioned at the start of this, my first show, that glitches, strange, unexplainable things, and even miracles have followed my family for generations. Again, I won't try to claim to know exactly why this is, just that it is. Now, at least one member of my family didn't appreciate the spiritual gifts we have and told me so. He said he turned his off because it, quote, scared him too much. While I personally see mine as mostly a good thing, even a blessing from Jesus himself, I still understand what he meant. After a life filled with such events, one thing I can say with absolute certainty is it sure isn't for everyone. Nonetheless, in that vein, I thought I'd share this story from my family history. It does not involve me, as it is about my grandmother and her son, my uncle, and happened decades before I was even born. Still, this old story nonetheless provides a significant look at what I mean by the unexplained follows my family. I call this evening's second tale, Spirit Guide Grandmother. This happened at the very close of World War II in Germany. If you've ever visited this nation, you will have had to have seen its rolling, thick, forested countryside. The German landscape is as beautiful as it is vast. Needless to say, it's nowhere you want to be lost, especially as an American in World War II. Doubly so if you aren't blonde and blue-eyed. Let's just say my uncle was a far cry from anyone mistaking him for an Aryan. But he was lost. While on a mission or whatnot, my uncle somehow got separated from his platoon. I can't supply additional details because they got lost over time in the telling of this story, but my mother told me enough to understand the very real danger he found himself in. You did not want to be an American of his ethnicity found alone in Germany during World War II, but that's exactly where he found himself. Obviously, he was terrified. The movement of his troops had began in the afternoon, but during that time he got separated from them. Now, alone, lost, afraid, and on the run, he knew just around the next tree or valley his death could await. As twilight fell, so too did his hope of finding his men. At this, then, his lowest moment, was where things got unusual. He said he had no clue where he should go and was beginning to panic. Then he said something. He was never more specific than that, so I don't know what form this took, but something clearly not of flesh and blood appeared to him. He was absolutely flabbergasted, but while certainly astonished, he remembered never feeling anything from it that would have frightened him. Quite the contrary, in fact. He could perceive love from it, if that were possible. Its energy was warm and inviting and soothed him in a way, and at a time such a thing seemed impossible, but it still did. Instinctively needing and craving the calm peace the entity provided, he said he knew he could trust it. So, while aware this entire thing made absolutely no sense, he also knew he could be discovered by enemy forces at any moment. Thus, having no better plan at the moment, my uncle said it seemed to want to guide him, and he said without hesitation he followed. After some time in what was by then black, inky darkness in the German forest, he began hearing voices, a lot of them. He fought panic, as this was precisely what he had been trying to avoid. He feared greatly then that he was nearing a large enemy encampment. But still, the spirit guide seemed to urge him forward, so he followed, but slowly, stealthily, and with his weapon at the ready. He said he thought that was going to be the end and decided that if that was the case, he was taking some Nazis with him. He crept through the bush until he could see over the last hill between he and they, and to his absolute shock, the American flag flew over the encampment. He then realized, to his glee, that he was somehow, inexplicably, back at his base. Moreover, his spirit guide was now gone, without a trace. Once back in his barracks, he said he had a strong urge to call his mother. Perhaps it was the day's drama that drove him to do so. Perhaps it was just that he missed her. But in any case, the shocks of the day were not quite over. Though this in itself, if the story ended here, would be pretty amazing, it doesn't. When he called my grandmother, a very religious Christian woman, she was over the moon to hear from him, more than she usually was by a great deal. "Oh, I'm so glad you called, son. Thank God you're all right. I was so worried about you." These words didn't seem to fit. She, of course, was always happy to hear from him, but something about this time, he said, felt different. He ventured to ask her why she had been so worried about him that particular day, giving away nothing of his adventure in the forest or the spirit guide that had led him safely back to his base. My grandmother said that she had been asleep when he called and had had a nightmare. She said she dreamed of him lost and afraid and in great danger. She said she came to his side to assist his finding his way back to safety. It was then my uncle confessed to his mother what had happened. In keeping with the family theme for our next story of the evening, as it's always nighttime somewhere, I'll recount an experience my mother herself had, as told directly from her to me. As in the previous story, this short tale does not involve me, but this brief tale does nonetheless serve to again vividly illustrate the love and strong spiritual connection between and among mothers and sons in my family clan, as well as my claim of coming from a family that rather normally experiences the unexplainable. I call this unusual documented case of cordless communication maternal messages. This happened in the early 2000s. And while perhaps not quite a glitch, as some of my stories are, it does easily qualify as paranormal. Now, at the time, my mother was living alone in our childhood home in what I'll just call the breadbasket, or what used to be, of the United States at the time. Mother had 3 children, all of which had been long gone by the time this occurred. She had for some time been living all alone as her husband had died years earlier. Strong, fierce, and stubbornly independent, my mother was not the kind of woman to get lonely. She occupied herself happily searching and recording our family history and genealogy. Be that as it may, any mother is going to want to communicate with her children occasionally. On one particular occasion, she wanted to communicate with my younger brother, a high-end professional, then living on the coast at the other side of the country. Let's call him Carlos. So, my mother calls him, but has no success. She waits a significant amount of time and calls Carlos again. She still cannot reach him. Mom knows Carlos is a busy man. Too busy to answer calls from her. Not that he doesn't want to or doesn't care, but in his line of work, time costs by the minute. This is the norm. Reaching him is always nearly impossible. Fed up with using man-made modes of communication that failed her time after time, she tells me she decides to try another form of communication. So, Mom goes into a quiet room, extinguishes the light, sits on the couch, and closes her eyes. She tells me she then focuses her attention and intention
on Carlos, sends a thought out to him for him to call her. She says not 10 minutes pass before her phone rings. She answers knowingly and says, "Hello, Carlos." He was understandably surprised, but she only laughs and says, "I see you got my message." Carlos doesn't understand this at all and asks her how she knew it would be him on the other end. So she tells him and blows his mind. He doesn't call her untruthful, but wonders aloud how. She laughs again and says, "So why did you call me just now, son?" Carlos says, "Well, I was busy just working away at my desk when suddenly, for no reason, I have an intrusive thought, call Mom now." So I did. "That was the message I sent, all right," she says, "and I finally got through." This next story is dark, depressing, and not for everyone. It is the saddest, most tragic tale I've ever told, or ever will, I hope. Thus, take me seriously as I issue the following warning. If you are sensitive, easily upset, or triggered by mortality, you may want to skip this one. Should you choose to continue, remember, you were warned. This too is a family tale, but there are no happy endings this time. This very personal story is even more painful than the first, but again, it shows how strange things seem to stalk my family, usually for the good, but I'll let you decide if that was true or not in this case. Whatever you decide, this story is ultimately God answering a desperate request, the kind no one wants to ever pray or ever have answered. I call it Sun in the Surf. I was fortunately not a part of this story. Unfortunately, I was a bystander, a mere 6 years old when it occurred. My mother and biological father divorced when I was 3. There were good reasons for this, as my father was into, let's just say, dark things. Alcohol, drugs, but even worse, forbidden, dark, spiritual things some might call magic, but I just call demonic. Although, to be fair to my father, the man was never anything but good to me. Still, he was verbally and physically abusive to my mother and my older brother. But this story isn't about him or them. It's about the man my mother married after. Let's call him Tyrell. Tyrell was very different. He was also good to me, but he was good to everyone. Now, Tyrell had also been previously married and had children. One of these was a boy. By this time, he was 17. Let's call him Arturo. Tyrell had a sailor's heart and loved the sea. Because of this, he owned several yachts over his lifetime. Being so young, I don't know all the details of this horrid tale, but I will briefly share the main facts of my older stepbrother's death. Arturo attended a very private, very exclusive military prep school and was close to graduating. A bright, handsome, and generous person, my older stepbrother had a loving family, a doting father, and seemingly the brightest of futures before him, until it wasn't. While home from school, he and a group of friends went up to the yacht. Certainly boys will be boys, and horseplay and probably alcohol played a part in the tragedy, but none of that was ever confirmed. All we were told by the boys afterwards was that Arturo had sailed them in the craft far out to sea, not out of sight of the shore, but still far. Few other details other than they dropped anchor, and after some time, Arturo, always a strong swimmer, They said dove in after deciding to swim to shore where our summer home was. He never made it to shore. I remember that part of the entire horrid history clearly because even to my 6-year-old mind, it sounded preposterous. Why would he take his friends out that far on a perfectly functional seaworthy vessel only to attempt swimming back in the dead of night alone? Too young to voice these doubts myself, I could but stand by and watch my family's slow descent into a watery hell. The new day dawned, bringing an optimistic, warm summer sun, but no Arturo. The boy's mother called and told Tyrell that morning that she hadn't heard from him since midday past when he and some friends left for the summer home and yacht a state away. I then watched my stepfather succumb swiftly to a hot panic, as if he knew even then, at the first, that things would never be the same. The authorities were soon notified and a search was swiftly mounted a state away, in spite of the Coast Guard's best efforts to confirm the boy's well-being or prove his demise. No word. With the next day's dawn came a new inclination. Tyrell had decided that he was going up to the area and join the search for his son. Of course, ridiculous to think he could find one person in so much sea, especially where the state police and Coast Guard had failed. Upon our arrival, the presence of the authorities was impressive. Ships scoured the shoreline in case the boy's body had washed ashore, while helicopters and Coast Guard divers systematically searched the sea itself for miles. Despite my resolve to aid both my stepfather and the search party, my parents decided I should take some respite and eat. At least that's what my mother told me as she took me back to our summer house for lunch. Thus, we reluctantly left Tyrell to wander the sand and sea alone, seeking his only son. The next thing we knew, it all suddenly ended. While not with Tyrell, I know well what happened next. I know because later in the car, through hot tears, he told us what had happened in the final moment of holding out hope for still having a son. While what he told us seemed unlikely, even miraculous, we had horrible proof of his honesty. He said he had no more to give. He was able to withstand no more of this seemingly endless, hellish ordeal. He was at the end of his strength and sanity, so this lost and broken father standing in waist-deep water stopped searching the seas for the first time in hours and started searching the heavens. He told us with fresh tears in his eyes that he looked heavenward and prayed this one last prayer for his son. Jesus, I'm at my end. If my son is out here, please, just let me know. Lord, this not knowing is killing me.
No sooner than he had uttered these words, the stormy, overcast skies parted over him, and a beam of sunlight shone down directly at his front. Tyrell looked back to the water as he could now see into the dark depths, and to his amazement, shock, and ultimate horror, he beheld what the beam revealed. He was standing directly over Arturo's body.
For this evening's final tale, I thought I would end where I began, in a matter of speaking, with a story of my own. This is a simple tale, but still rather unlikely utilizing conventional logic for explanation. I can only make sense of it in light of Schrodinger's cat, quantum wave dynamics, and reality shaped by mental perception. I call this one, Thanos Can't Fly. While walking alone at a busy public pool, I passed happy families. I saw mothers and fathers, sons and daughters enjoying the warm sun and each other. Some of the parents ate lunch with their children while others frolicked in the water. Towels, trays, and toys were everywhere, and I moved through the mild chaos alone, unmolested and unnoticed. But I noticed something. Nothing strange or odd, mind you, just one of the children's random toys from no less than 10 meters away, teetering on the edge of a cabana coffee table, apparently forgotten by some child presently occupied elsewhere. Nothing about it was remarkable or even recognizable at that point from such a distance, save its color, a bright, childlike lemon yellow. Don't misunderstand me. I didn't pick it out to focus on it. The scene was too merrily chaotic. It's just that I noticed it between steps in the object's general direction. I didn't care what it was or who it belonged to. I just continued on my way. But since I was heading in its general direction and, moreover, would have to actually pass by it, that is, if I didn't want to walk off the edge of the concrete deck and into the pool itself, that is, I closed on the yellow object and began to curve my trajectory to take me around the pool. I noticed what it was. It was a helicopter. Not at all interested in it, I felt my mind dart back years to when I read comics in childhood. I, for no reason, remembered then a Spider-Man comic series for young new readers called Spidey Super Stories or some such similar sounding name. I remembered how I always rejected selecting that particular title in favor of Marvel's more mature magazines. I recalled how the reason for this was the sheer silliness of such stories, which I deemed during a ripe age of childhood to be a waste of a serious comic reader like myself's time, although I understood their purpose, to prompt reading among youngsters and respected its right to exist. I came to know and become familiar with it after reading a story about Spider-Man having to deal with the mad titan THANOS. Yes, that THANOS. And such was my point and case for feeling Spidey's super stories was simply stupid. In an issue I'd either mistakenly bought or picked up to check for that mighty Marvel action, I remembered Thanos flying through New York on some ludicrous mission in, yes, a yellow helicopter. I might have tolerated this diminishing of the character having to travel in such a way, like he couldn't just teleport to where he needed to go or fly there. Well, I thought at least he wasn't taking a yellow taxi. But what was a stupid step too far was the fact that printed in simple black letters on the side of the chopper was the name THANOS. I remember chuckling at how ridiculous and childish that was before putting the mag as far away from me as I could. I felt a smirk cross my lips as I stepped on. The closer I got, the more I saw how much the toy seemed to look like the drawing in the comic. Closer still, and I could see that it was an exact copy of the design from the Spider-Man comic. Now, a bit taken aback at the coincidence of having thought mere moments before of the helicopter and now seeing that this yellow object was indeed the same design as the one I remembered, I thought, it sure would be a trip if it said THANOS. Now unable to keep my eyes from it as I passed it, I saw clearly emblazoned in simple black letters across its side the word THANOS. What were the odds, I thought? Slim, I bet. I stopped smirking, but kept stepping. And with that, I will close this evening's door to the DiMENSiONSCAPE. If you dug what I did, subscribe and like the video. Until next time, if there is such a thing, this is Gary 7MT simply reminding you, we all are in this together. Show love, and it shall be shown to you. Peace.